Well, there's a similar story found in the 8th chapter of John's Gospel. It's the story of a woman who was caught in the act of adultery. She's also guilty, and Jesus could have judged her harshly. She deserved condemnation. She deserved punishment. She deserved judgment. But Jesus treats her gently. You know that story too. He bends down and he writes in the sand, and he shames her accusers until they slither away. And then look at what he says to her in verse 10. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." No accusations, no stones hurled. He just says, okay, you've messed up so far. Turn it around. That's what repentance means, to turn 180 degrees and to walk away from lifestyle sin. There's a third story in Luke 19. It's the story of Zacchaeus. You remember Zacchaeus? We used to sing about him in Sunday school, the wee little man. And he got all of his self-esteem from taking other people's money. I don't know why, I've always pictured him as Danny DeVito. But, if they ever did a movie about Zacchaeus, I think they should get Danny DeVito to play the part. I really do. Anyway, he was ruthless, he was rich, he was dishonest, but he was curious about Jesus, as we see in verse 3 of Luke 19. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. And soon we see a very changed Zacchaeus. And we hear Jesus saying, "Today salvation has come to this house." But how would we deal with people like this if they came into our church? A dishonest businessman, an adulterous woman, an immoral woman, a lady who has lived with 6 different guys thinking that each one might be Mr. Right. Would we judge them? Would we sit in our ivory tower looking down our noses at them? Would we tell them that they're not welcomed here until they clean up their act? Have you ever noticed the philosophies of our world tend to creep into our Christianity? And it doesn't mean that we look at someone living a sinful lifestyle and say, "Oh, it's okay, you continue to live in that sinful lifestyle." But Jesus accepted them just for who they were. I'm glad Jesus accepted me just for who I am. May I suggest that that's exactly what gentleness is all about? Dealing with people who have been broken and twisted and mangled in life. Why do you suppose Jesus didn't condemn them? I think it's because his motivation was far different. He never came to condemn anyone. Rather, he came to restore and to save. We're all very familiar with John 3:16. God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. We can all quote it from memory. And we count that as probably the most important verse in the Bible. But I believe that verse 17 is equally as important. It says, "For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him." We can never lose sight of the fact that Jesus came to seek and to save what was lost. That was his whole purpose. We can't expect lost people to act like they're saved, because they're not. I mean, have you ever seen somebody come to the altar and they say the sinner's prayer? In evangelical churches, we think that's their ticket to heaven. And then we expect them to act like they've been saved for 35 years. Can't expect lost people to act like they're saved. Can't expect newly saved people to act like they've been saved for 35 years either. Going to Galatians 6. Finally, I want you to see how gentleness is to be used. Galatians 6:1 says, brothers, let's include the sisters, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who are spiritual should restore him gently. Note the terminology there. If someone is caught in a sin, it's a trap. It's a lure. It's a web. If a person is caught and all wrapped up in their sin, he says, you who are spiritual, that is, you who are mature in the Lord, you who are spirit-filled, filled with God's Spirit, restore him gently. The New Living Translation phraseology is like this: gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. Or the way the Amplified Bible puts it, you who are responsive to and controlled by the Spirit should set him right and restore him and reinstate him without any sense of superiority and with all gentleness. That's the way gentleness is to be used in restoration of those who have lost their way. We live in a war zone. Cliff made reference to it earlier when we were praying. That it's getting harder and harder to stand up and be a Christian these days because the world is coming against us. And they're saying, man, do you believe that? What is wrong with you? You must have psychological problems if you believe there's a God. You need a crutch to lean on. That's what it is. People make fun of us for having faith. Harder and harder. We live in a war zone. I mean, don't you feel it? There's spiritual war going on all around us. And I sometimes get the sense that we're surrounded by exploding lives and characters and relationships. You can almost hear the cry of the wounded and the suffering. Don't you see the mangled souls in marriages, all because they made wrong choices? And that's it. Choices. Bad choices result in bad consequences. Maybe it's a businessman who made an unethical choice in business, and his integrity is now suspect. Maybe he's about to lose his job. Maybe it's someone who has made wrong moral decisions, and now he finds himself infected with an STD, and his marriage has been destroyed. Maybe it's a woman who had chose to have an abortion. She's aborted her child, and now she's dealing with the guilt and the remorse. Or maybe it's a young man who made wrong choices sexually, and now he's caught in the trap of homosexuality. Or maybe it's a teenager who's made unhealthy choices with drugs or alcohol. God is saying, when you see people who are caught in sin, like Zacchaeus, like the woman at the well, like the woman caught in adultery, he says, when you see people like that, church, be gentle. Hold them tenderly. Be careful. Their lives are so fragile. They could be easily broken, but they can also be restored. So treat them with gentleness. Pick them up and hold them tenderly. Show them the way to repentance, the path back to me, because they're mine. I created them, and I want them back. More than anything else, I want them back in a right relationship with me.